It's January 2025, and school is somewhat in the middle of the year. But what does that really look like for teachers and principals? Do your students feel like they get it? Do they understand what they're learning? Learning is not a secret, but it tends to be a secret when we just hand students a worksheet or say, read this or do that. Instead, there are three things that can really help you as a principal and a teacher to make sure that students really are clear on what they're learning and they can take ownership of that learning. Here they are. Learning intentions sometimes can be really confusing, and even clarifying what students are learning in the classroom can feel confusing. It can be confusing for the teacher, the principal, and especially the students. And it feels almost cliche now that we really understand Hattie's work, visible learning, success criteria, and learning intentions. What I want you to think about if you are specifically a teacher in the classroom is, what does this really look like from a student's perspective? Meaning, if you were to ask the student, what are you learning today? And if they say to you this worksheet, there's no learning happening there. They're just doing some activity. If you are specific in, this is the content standard we're going to be learning today. And by the end of today, tomorrow, in 3 weeks or so, you're going to know what this looks like. You're going to be able to articulate what this means, and you're going to be able to show me what this looks like. Then you know that there is a learning intention. Now, the success criteria is when you're able to do this, this, and this, when you're able to add two add-ins and come up with the sum, I know that you've learned it because you know that these two objects or four objects or whatever it is will give you a sum, the total. Then I know you've learned it. The idea of real world doesn't mean that you will be able to do this so you can get a job. Please get that out of your head. It's, are you being very specific as to what students are learning? Do they know that when you learn this, it's going to help you with understanding if it's multiplication, the product, if it's using the periodic table and understanding that the rows and the columns mean two different things? Do they understand what they actually are learning, or do you just do some activity? And I say this because if you are clear, students should understand exactly what they're learning by the end of whatever it is. Learning should not be a secret. And it feels like it if you are confused. And you know this if you ever went to college, if you were a student, or even when you're in professional development, you're like, I don't really know what is the purpose of this? If you can get students to ask questions, and even if you teach students to say, I don't really understand why I'm learning this, then you've given them the power to question what you're doing so that students really can be engaged in owning what is happening in the classroom. And yes, this can happen at a very young age, even before being 5 years old in kindergarten, because by the time they get to high school and college, you want them to question what they're learning so that it goes into their long-term memory. Now, the next thing is aligning the instruction, the product that you have, with the content. Be very specific on what you're doing, meaning you're not just turning the page of the product, the curriculum. You're not just throwing up a standard on the board and saying, yeah, this is what we're doing. You are aligning what the assessment is at the end. You're aligning the activities that are happening in the classroom, the problem project-based learning, or the activity problem project-based learning, whatever that looks like, so that students are engaged in the process. Because if you can attach an emotion to the learning, it will go into the long-term memory. That emotion meaning they're comfortable enough to say, I don't get it. And then when they're looking at the product or the activity, by the end, they're able to go back into their long-term memory, even their short-term memory, and say, okay, this is what we were doing. This even holds true kinder through sixth grade, seventh, eighth, and through high school, where you're aligning vocabulary that is meaningful, so it gets rid of some confusion. Even across content, so in elementary school, grammar school, we typically will integrate science and mathematics and language and historical context and art and PE. which seems to be a lot easier. And you can use some of the same vocabulary throughout and adding that academic language. You can do that in middle and high school as well, because you can work together collectively with other groups of teachers and say, well, what vocabulary are you using so that we use the same thing? And being very specific with, if you are using strategies, that you are removing those strategies where you're not just one that sometimes bothers me is the think, pair, share, because you don't want kids to be, in college going, I need to think, pair, share. What you want them to do is learn how to collaborate and have conversations and discussions and using higher order thinking. The think, pair, share is just the name of the strategy. You want them to be able to have those conversations, for example, with what's happening in the classroom, with the instruction that's happening, that's cross curriculum, that's using the same vocabulary and being specific and clear on how they integrate. Every student learns at a different rate. They learn at a different pace. And it is imperative that you talk about learning goals, that you talk about it in small groups with students, with individual students, the entire class, and letting families, parents, and guardians know this is what we're learning throughout the year. It's actually okay to give a syllabus to young students so that they know that by the end of the school year, this is what you're learning. It's okay to give the parents that syllabus, or even if you're doing it month by month, like, these are the content standards that we're learning. These are the activities that we're doing so that if parents want to support at home. Economically advantaged students have parents that sometimes will offer things that the economically disadvantaged students don't have. Tutors, access to worldly things, going to museums. We can give that to our economically disadvantaged students too. We can teach them how to question. We can teach them that these are the things that are organized for you in that checklist, in that list of things to do. And we can inspire and give them access through the things that you do in the classroom. I mean, we have the World Wide Web. We have things like generative AI. There's so many things that we can do to make learning clear and accessible so that it's not a secret. What I would like you to do is make sure that you subscribe, like, and follow. And come back. Let me know what you're doing with Clarity for Learning in the classroom. And make sure that you're having fun helping your students get really good at learning. Thank you so much for watching.